Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bartek Czyczerski. I'm the CEO of Business Science Poland, your co-host for this afternoon, alongside with very friendly and respectful organizations, our partner organizations for this afternoon, Instytut for Green Economy, the National Development Bank of Poland, and the Polish Business Federation Lewiatan. It is my pleasure to warmly welcome all members of the audience, especially our special guests. It's been just 15 days of Poland assuming the presidency of the EU, and this gathering represents the first policy discussion under the formal auspices of the Polish presidency in this town, in Brussels. But January 2025 also marks other new beginnings. We have a newly inaugurated European Commission, which is gradually gaining momentum, especially with its much anticipated Competitiveness Compass, which was supposed to be published today. It is slightly delayed, as we know, but this initiative will soon provide an outline of the Commission plans how to address known challenges related to European competitiveness. Across the Atlantic, the United States will soon witness also its own inauguration of its old new president. This American context is particularly relevant for us today because the American Inflation Reduction Act serves as an important point of reference for shaping the EU Competitiveness Fund and financing the EU industrial policy. These topics will be addressed in greater detail by Mr. Marcin Korolec, President of the Institute of Green Economy, during his presentation. But before that, we are honored to welcome an address from Mr. Robert Kropiwnicki, who is representing the presidency. And as the minister responsible for state assets, he brings important insights closely tied and related to industrial policy. Following Mr. Kropiwnicki, we'll also hear from another leading European policymaker, Minister Borys Budka, well known in this town, chair of European Parliament's committee responsible for energy, industry and research. Therefore, it is my great pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Kropiwnicki. The floor is yours. Pick up your headphones, please.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to be here with you today. I'd like to thank you for inviting me, for organizing this meeting, which is one of the first events of the Polish presidency. It's an extremely important moment for discussing the issue of European economy and the competitiveness of European economy. It's a crucial moment right now because we are going to decide about the future of the industry and the whole economy and the change which is taking place. Will it be friendly to employees and to the whole industry? So this discussion which is going on today under the auspices of Business Science Poland is very important for the economy. We wanted to have discussions right here because we have the Polish Embassy for political matters, but we wanted to have an economic embassy. This institution, BSP, is the Polish Embassy for Economy. I'm so pleased that this debate is being organized here today. And the economic doctrine of the European Union, the future of the European Union, will depend to a large degree on the clean industrial deal. How will decarbonization be implemented? Which directions are going to take? We expect that plans will change. We expect this new direction to be industry-friendly. It needs to be friendly to the industry, to the economy. This new direction which we'll take must make the economy more competitive. So we'll talk about competitiveness and about financing transition. Finance is an essential element where we would not be able to function without finances. So we wanted to discuss this issue as well. We want to hear how we can support the economic transition, the economic change, so that it is more friendly and so that the economy remains competitive. And this is connected with the issue of security, a broadly defined security. This includes the economic aspect as well. The global stage is very complex, and the European Union must be able to find its place in the global stage, in the global supply chains. We must protect our markets, but without expanding, it will be difficult to maintain what we have. So the change which we're going to implement must be done correctly, smartly. If the reality is different from the indicators that we have, then we must correct the indicators. Everything changes. The world is changing. Plans and strategies must be adapted to reality. We cannot construct anything today based on plans which were drawn up years ago in a different reality, which is gone. So this is what we're going to talk about. And as I mentioned, this is going to be a very important time for the European Union and for our presidency. The forthcoming 100 days for the European Commission and for us, it will be a key moment for discussions about the change. So thank you once again for inviting me. And I believe BSP will play a crucial role in this discussion, and it will be a true ambassador of Poland in the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We'll take your words with us during our mission. Now I would like to ask Mr. Budka to also take a floor. Thank you.
Szanowni Państwo,
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for inviting me here today. We agreed with Mr. Kropiwnicki that this opening part will be the Polish part. So once again, thank you for being here, for coming here. This place is becoming a symbol of a valuable discussion about the whole European economy, not just the Polish economy. So together with BSP, we are doing what we can. Well, the most important element is the human capital, so we wanted to be seen here in Brussels. I am the chair of the ITRE committee in the European Parliament, and in this capacity I have the pleasure to take the floor at this key moment. Right now, the word competitiveness is on everybody's lips. Everyone's using this word. We're talking about energy transformation, motoring industry, digitization, and we need courage in all those industries, and we need vision, as mentioned by Minister Kropiwnicki. The Draghi report stated that Europe has an existential challenge to face. This report is not just a diagnosis, it's also a roadmap. Lack of investment in clean technologies, stagnation of the industry, and competitive pressure from the United States or China, all of those factors are a risk to us. We might lose a position of the leader, which we have. The motoring industry, it was a pillar of European economy. Now the motoring industry is suffering. We are lagging behind, not only as concerns battery technology. We're actually closing European motoring factories. We are limiting production. We are reducing staff here in Europe. But we must not be pessimistic. The report and the challenge which we face are not a sentence which has been handed down upon us. We can meet those challenges with appropriate financing, and this will be a subject which will be discussed at length today. Minister Korolec will talk about financing. So we can rebuild European industry, we can make it a global leader, especially in the field of clean technologies. So our economy must be based on knowledge and innovation. Our economy must compete on equal terms with our partners from across the Atlantic Ocean. Our economy should be the leader in renewable energy, in digitization, in green technologies. Europe must, for this purpose, remain united. Only through transnational cooperation and only through providing support to member states who have less developed potential will we achieve success. So we must do all of that, because this will determine how the European industry will look tomorrow. Together we can rebuild our competitiveness, and we can make Europe an example to all how competitiveness should look. So this is what the Polish presidency will deal with. Thank you once again for inviting me. I am certain that we will meet many times here again during the coming year. I'm quite sure that what we hear today and throughout the year will play an important role in shaping of the European policies. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, it's loud. Okay. My name is Joanna Becker. I'm the Deputy Managing Director of Politica Insight, which is a center of policy analysis based in Warsaw, but we have our representative here in Brussels, and many of you might know Tomasz Bielecki, who is here based in Brussels and has been for many years. And I will have the pleasure of moderating today's debate. Thank you so much to the organizers for inviting me. But before our panelists sit and debate the issue of European competitiveness and the European Competitiveness Fund, I would like to invite Marcin Korolec, former Poland's Minister for Environment and the CEO of the Green Economy Institute, to give his presentation and show his ideas on how to fix Europe's competitiveness problem and make Europe great again. Marcin.
How to fix it? Happy to be here. Smile. How to fix it? Looking at the broader geopolitical landscape, today is 1056th day since Russia attacked Ukraine. From my Warsaw office to the border with Ukraine, which is fighting not only for freedom but also for our values, it is about 250 kilometers, which is about the same distance as from here to Amsterdam. Presidential victory of Donald Trump and announcement of the aggressive trade policy of the new American administration make Europe the most attractive market for Chinese technologies. Symptoms of Europe's economic fragility we can see already today, especially in automotive industry, which is unable to produce competitively priced electric cars. Europe leading car manufacturers are halting production lines or laying out workers. Unless radical reform is taken, an economic crisis of proportions not seen in recent decades await us in Europe. This is an existential challenge. In those words, Mario Draghi described the consequences of the imbalance in investment and productivity between Europe and our main economic rivals in clean tech industries, namely US and China. But Draghi's statement referred not only to European industry as we know it, but which is even more important, to European social model, which seems to us our acquired right. The beginning of a new political cycle of European institutions is an opportunity to take courageous decisions. It is therefore a sign of optimism that President of the Commission declared that industrial policy is one of top priorities for new European institutions. There are many reasons for insufficient development of clean tech industries in Europe. One reason for sure is the difference in the conception of policy foundations. While in Europe, policy has focused on creating market and demand for clean tech technologies, demand-side policy, our main economic rivals focus on stimulating technologies and industrial capacities that will guarantee availability of clean tech products, supply-side policy. Both approaches lead to emission reductions. However, the latter approach, while ensuring emission reductions, safeguards as well the competitiveness of the economy and, most importantly, leads to the creation and retention of high-quality clean tech industries. Over the last few months, we at the Green Economy Institute, together with Cambridge Econometrics, supported by Polska z Natury Foundation, we have undertaken an intellectual exercise. We have asked ourselves how to guarantee a level playing field for European entrepreneurs in the world where our main competitors do not play by rules and support theirs openly, like it is in the case of the US, or covertly, like it is a case with China. So we decided to work on a mechanism which would create a level playing field comparing to the conditions US government created for US-based entrepreneurs. We were inspired by President Ursula von der Leyen announcement of the creation of European Competitiveness Fund. During this work we started in August last year. We developed 7 recommendations. First, the form of the fund should be established along lines with Next Generation EU. The funding source for the fund should be joint European debt. There are some voices arguing that the fund should be financed directly from European budget, but it would create natural competition with other policies that we are traditionally financing from the EU budget, such as cohesion policy, agriculture policy, or with new areas that deserve such a funding, such as resilience and defense policy. Consequently, we will be faced with alternative of either increasing the size of the EU budget to unprecedented proportions, which is rather unlikely, or making very difficult political choices and consequently insufficient funding for industrial policy. Second, timing. The fund should become operational as soon as possible, preferably already 2027. Remember, 2026, Next Generation EU is ending. Third, the size of the fund should make it possible to equalize level of support which American-based industries are receiving under IRA. Fourth, the areas of intervention of the fund should support only clean tech producers. Fifth, the distribution of the fund between member states. As in the most European conversation, here similarly, 2 questions will be most exciting ones. First, who, and second, how much will benefit from the fund. The distribution of the fund should consider 2 elements. First, the size of the industry in a given country. Second, the scale of the challenge posed by transformation processes towards climate neutrality target. And to put it bluntly, those who are lagging behind should be slightly favorized, both in energy transition processes and in funding opportunities for innovations development. Therefore, if you would choose those criteria as an algorithm for distribution of the fund, Italy would be the first beneficiary with 17% of the fund, Spain second with 14, Poland third with 13.5, Germany fourth, 11, and France fifth with almost 10% of the fund. Remember, the primary objective of the fund should be to save, create jobs, and build added value in the industries that will ensure our competitiveness and in the same time helping meet our climate objectives. Therefore, funds should be allocated where the industry is expected to engage challenging transformational processes. Without a strong European economy/industry, we will not be able to face challenges, especially in cohesion and resilience areas. 6. Another emotional question, who? Another emotional question, how much? How we will repay the debt? Here, I would like to draw your attention on 3 points. First, when issuing new debt as a community, we should have a moment of reflection about the system of own resources of the Union. Import duties are one of primary own resources of the Union. In recent days, a lot has been said about import duties for electric cars from China. I'm asking myself why, after adopting a climate neutrality goal by the European Union, we were not imposing high import tariffs for internal combustion engine cars in the first place. But as we take on new financial liabilities, perhaps we should expand catalogue of Union's own resources, taxing heavily all internet giants like X, Facebooks, Google, TikToks of this world. Not only because they make huge profit in the European single market, but also they don't pay taxes here, and by the way, they are main reason for structure underfunding of European press, taking away most of the advertising revenues. And their headquarters are mostly in the US or China. More we will tax them, less we will need to repay from our own pockets. Second, coming back to the question of repayment of jointly contracted liabilities, we can approach them in a traditional way, copying the way in which liabilities are shared in the financing of common European budget. This is more or less what happened with the Next Generation EU. Third, in case of this fund, I think it would be worth considering a different system of burden sharing. De bon côté for de bons amis, as they are saying in France. By which I mean a system where, in principle, each country would repay its own share of the common debt. Adopting such a repayment method would shorten the discussions on the adoption of the fund, and time is not on our side. Seventh, if we really want to help European entrepreneurs, we should introduce a system that is friendly for them. That is to say, one predictable, one that operates automatically when objective criteria are met, without discretionary decisions, and therefore without uncertainty. To conclude, the scale of the challenge of transforming European industry and restoring its competitiveness requires extraordinary measures. Let me return once again to the words of Mario Draghi, indicating existential threat for Europe. Those words must be taken seriously. If there is an existential threat, it seems obvious that we should introduce mechanisms corresponding to the size and challenge we are facing. Thank you.
Marcin and the Green Economy Institute has been working for months together with Cambridge Econometrics, and we have Edo Omic, who is the principal economist and head of European environmental policy at Cambridge Econometrics in Brussels, and he will tell you a little bit about the methodology and also about the economic impact of the EU Competitiveness Fund as presented by Marcin. Edo, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's good to be here and to have an opportunity to discuss the work we did with Marcin in trying to actually model this fund that we designed together to give a bit of a thought experiment as to what would this actually look like from an economic element and the impacts. Now, I'm afraid I'm an economist and a policy analyst, so I have slides, but I'm not sure. Yeah, there they are. I can't live without them at this point. So Again, thank you very much, Marcin. So I represent Cambridge Econometrics. We are a research institution based out of Cambridge, United Kingdom, with historical links to the university. We have offices here in Brussels, and we work predominantly here in Brussels with the European Commission, with national governments, and with national government agencies or organizations to help analyze the impacts of different economic policies, environmental policies, climate change policies, and understanding the social impact that those policies will have on Europe, but also globally. We worked with Marcin and his colleagues at the Green Economy Institute to really try to simulate what a hypothetical competitiveness fund would look like to assess, as Marcin said, how the EU could respond to the various global industrial policies that are currently on the landscape. Also an assessment to understand how the EU can ultimately meet its Net Zero Industry Act objectives and manufacturing capacity improvements, and then in turn assess how this will impact the economy. So I think it's important as a starting point to give us an understanding of what is the current global policy landscape. Now, pretty much I think everyone in this room has been following these issues very closely, so I'll be probably speaking already to well-informed audience members. But as we know, over the last 4 to 5 years, there has been a clear shift in the policy landscape as we have seen that many countries are now examining and looking at how fragile global economies can be, especially given the fragility we saw during international supply chains being upended during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we saw increasing concerns for dependencies of external markets for critical materials, for certain key technologies, and in some cases even energy. And of course, as a response to this, many advanced economies deployed either direct or indirect policies to stimulate domestic industrial capacities, to accelerate their own decarbonization efforts, and to increase domestic content shares of key technologies that are necessary for the green and digital transition. The figure to the right shows the various policy measures implemented by a key selection of advanced economies, and the vertical axis showing the share of different policies in terms of how much their value is in respect to the percentage of GDP. Now here we looked at, for instance, the United States Inflation Reduction Act, which we're all well aware of and what the point of this discussion is today. And here we saw that the IRA has a value that ranges anywhere as low as 1.4% officially to unofficial estimates of anywhere closer to 3.8%. Japan actually created its own policy as well recently, the Green Transition Plan, which was not necessarily a direct response to the IRA, but a deeper effort to respond to the needs of making sure their economy is modernized to meet the global competitiveness issues going forward for the green transition. That amounts to around, just around a little over 3% of its GDP. And then Canada actually created a response to the IRA within its own budget to try to ensure that there were enough funds allocated to help their industries stay competitive against the stimulation that the U.S. rivals would acquire. And we put at the very end there the EU Next Generation EU Fund, just to give you a sense of how much the EU is, in some cases, behind other global partners. For our exercise, we essentially started to create a simulated fund in broad terms by attempting to replicate the IRA itself. So we know the IRA officially is roughly around 1.4% of GDP. This results into an EU equivalent fund of around 237 billion euros. So we took that official IRA size, and this could of course be different, and there can be policy debates about the size, but this is just as an initial starting point for discussions. We then consider certain disbursement characteristics. First, the time perspective. As Marcin said, it would be implemented starting in 2027, so after the Next Generation EU elements are done. The duration of the fund would be 7 years, so it would end around 2033, so somewhat in line with the next MFF, and aligned with EU investment needs going forward. The figure here shows how much of that fund would be distributed each year on an annual basis, with an idea that we would front-load some of the distribution in the first 4 years, and that it would be an uneven distribution because not all firms can absorb this large influx of funding in equal speed. So the idea is that giving times in firms to adapt to the fund's disbursement. We made some assumptions about EU financing. As Marcin alluded to, it would be funded by EU common debt, which is what we put in our model. We would have a repayment that would start after the fund was finally dispersed, so it would start in 2034. The debt duration would be relatively long-term, 30 years, and the allocation to the fund by each member state would be based on the MFF contributions. We then designed the fund to be allocated to each country based on a set of different criteria. The first set of criteria here, population, GDP, and unemployment, is to look at the economic needs that these economies would potentially have. The fourth element was employment in manufacturing. The idea here was countries that have a large amount of employment in manufacturing may want to preserve that manufacturing base going forward, so we gave a certain share of that distribution to those countries. We finally also looked at the share of renewable energy sources and R&D spending. Here we looked at the inverse of those values. So countries that had lower shares of renewable energy or lower shares of R&D got a higher amount in relative terms. The idea being is that those countries may have had challenges in recent years to either find the financing to help with the transition or to finance R&D as well. So the idea was to help stimulate certain economies that were having challenges in doing so in the R&D sphere and renewable sphere. We then also have a sectorial distribution where we try to distribute the fund within our model to preserve and enhance competitiveness in the manufacturing of those key sectors that Marcin was alluding to. And here we look at the ones such as batteries, EVs, solar PV, wind turbines, heat pumps, hydrogen technologies, and carbon capture use and storage. So just a quick rundown. The fund is $237 billion. It's distributed across different countries based on what we described in an earlier slide, each year having a different allocation. The fund is then distributed to each country based on the shares relative to those different factors. So in the case of Poland, it would get a total of 13.5%. And then the proportion will be split among different sectors where countries have a competitiveness advantage. I won't go into detail too much here, but the way we did this is we looked at the current manufacturing capacities of different sectors and then allocated the fund based on where countries were currently competitive. So for instance, Denmark saw a large amount of its fund going to wind turbine technologies because that's where it has a current advantage in those technology lists, while in the case of Germany, more went to EVs because of its strong automotive production capacities. We also ensured that the fund had a clear CAPEX and OPEX split. So 21% of the fund would help with the capital costs of investments needed to actually create the new technologies and capacities. And 79% would be to help with operating costs in the long term, as this is we see as a very crucial element to successful industrial policy. Not just investing capital, but also making sure that operating costs are helped and maintained. If they're not, then one thing that often can be seen is that there can be a pass-through to consumers, and then some of the benefits that we would see from industrial policy might not translate into what we would hope to see. Modeling scenarios. So because we did a modeling exercise, we first had to understand something to compare the fund against. So as we put the fund into our macroeconomic model, we had to have something to compare it against as if the fund never was there. So we created a baseline, something that we can compare it against. The baseline includes assumptions that the EU will achieve its 90% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So the idea that regardless of if it's supply or demand-led, we will achieve those targets. Now the question is, will the fund help us achieve it without necessarily just demand side, as Marcin was saying? Assess existing policies and assuming that they're efficient in their allocation and their ability to meet the targets. So here we're talking about the Fit for 55 package as an example. We also assume the technologies necessary for the transition would be diffused and would be implemented to help meet those targets over time. So the right amount of renewable energies, the amount of EVs, and so forth would actually go into effect. And in terms of trade patterns, we looked at historical trade patterns and projected them forward without making any assumptions of any changes there. So we try to keep that as a non-changed element. This then led to the creation of a scenario that we would then input the fund to compare against this baseline. And in the scenario, what we did was to take the fund, based on the allocation that we just described in earlier slides, to see if the investment requirements to meet the Net Zero Industry Act domestic capacity targets of respective technologies via EU common debt financing would be met. And the fund allocation per country would be equally dispersed in terms of CAPEX and OPEX components, and as I indicated earlier, 21% for CAPEX, 79% for OPEX. I won't go into too much detail here, but the idea was CAPEX costs would look at the needed gigawatt of installed capacity of different technologies to meet the net 90% reduction targets, and the public-private split of CAPEX investment would occur where the fund only finances the public component, which is on average around 24% per technology. The remaining element will be for operating costs to help reduce domestic prices of given technologies as they're implemented throughout the economy. And this is just a footnote of what the domestic content share targets are in the NZIA. I'll give you a very quick deep dive into what we meant by CAPEX investment, because sometimes it's difficult to gauge how one can assess and evaluate this. So we take the case of wind power as an example that I'll present here, utilizing European Commission methodology that we applied for the time of the duration of the fund itself, so between 2027 and 2033. We applied this to all of our different technologies, and we tried to use this to calculate how much CAPEX or capital investment support will be needed for European Union to meet the domestic content shares. So if you take wind power, for instance, based on our macroeconomic model, the estimates in the model show that by 2033 in the baseline, so before the fund comes into effect, the EU would need around 47.5 gigawatts of installed wind power capacity. The domestic content shares, that has been highlighted by the European Commission, is around 85%, which means that the EU capacity needed to meet the target would be around 40.4 gigawatts of installed capacity of wind turbines. The current estimated capacity that we projected into 2026 is around just shy of 14 gigawatts, meaning that over the next 7 years or 10 years, we need to install roughly 26.5 gigawatts of wind turbine to meet that domestic content share requirement. We take that value and we multiply it by a European Commission assumption about how much this costs for each gigawatt installed, which means that in the term of our fund, between 2027 and 2033, we will need to allocate just under 7 billion euro just to help fund the capital costs of getting wind turbines and wind technologies up to the capacity needs to meet the NZIA targets. And the rest will then come in OPEX. Now, I'll give you a very quick brief overview, because I know we're short of time, about our E3ME model. It's a global macroeconomic model that connects the energy, environment, and economy sectors to give an ability for us to assess different policy instruments and to understand the economic, socioeconomic impacts and different various other elements that can help policymakers assess long-term trends of their policies that they want to implement. Its coverage is around 71 countries globally and all EU 27 member countries, 43 different economic sectors, and allows us to evaluate elements at the national level and at detailed sectorial level. It's utilizing a system of national accounts, so it's consistent with the statistical best practices and the data that national governments collect, and incorporates bilateral trade considerations as well. It's modular, so we have a lot of subcomponents that we can look at of different innovation and deployment of different technologies, demand-led diffusion of technologies from transport, heating, different other market penetration elements, and we're currently developing models related to hydrogen, agriculture, and land use models, because obviously this is going to be very important for the green transition. And it's empirically based and forward-looking. It's compromising of real-life data that goes from 1970 until 2022. It can project estimates up to 2050. And it's driven by real-life observations, historically speaking, rather than theory. So it's not an optimization model, it's a simulation model. So we actually are able to see what a policy, how when a policy is going, what it actually induces, what kind of behavior, and what are the inputs. It doesn't actually say what the policy should look like, but rather what it will behave like based on impacts of people's behavior. So I think the most important element is probably what interests people is the actual outputs of that model exercise. So when we look at the results in terms of GDP, with the implementation of the fund, EU GDP by 2040 would be 2% higher as a result of the fund than if it didn't get implemented. This will be led by an increase in domestic manufacturing capacity of targeted sectors, growth in the intermediary sectors that feed into those sectors as well, because there's a multiplier effect there, and the broader increases in overall demand of new technologies. There is some differences between different countries. For instance, France, Poland, Italy see a milder level increase in GDP, although still positive. And Germany and Czechia, for instance, see a much higher level, and that's because they have a much larger EV manufacturing base, or rather automated base, that could become a stronger EV base going forward. In terms of employment effects, we also see relatively positive elements. In the sectors that have been targeted, the manufacturing employment will increase by around 6.7% as a result of the fund, so it'll be higher than without it. Again, employment growth is driven by the fact that companies are expanding capacity to meet increasing demand, and as a result, that increases wages. Now, over time, the dispersion and the effect of employment does tend to peter out as some demand pressures begin to fall in the long term, but overall, still, regardless, the impacts are quite positive. And again, we see different elements. So in France and Czechia, there's a very sudden, sharp peak due to meeting of increased demand for EVs, for instance, and their EV sectors being highly important to meeting that demand, and lower level, but still positive growth in Germany, Poland, Italy, where they have, in some cases, more dispersed different sectors that they're examining in their funds allocation. Imports obviously will go down, so the targeted manufacturing sectors will increase their manufacturing capacity domestically, which will mean that we will see a lower reliance on imports from abroad. This in part is the fact that the fund is designed objectively to reduce import dependence over time. And overall, we also see a reduction in imports in the broader economy. Now, the model did also show that non-targeted sectors did see in some cases an increase in imports because they are trying to supply intermediary goods to help meet additional demand that's being demanded from the manufacturing sectors. And the final slide is really to look at the public finance implications. So, as we indicated, we put into the model that the fund would be funded through the EU common debt. But what was important, and to showcase what the yearly debt repayment elements in billions would be, is that between 2027 and 2033, only the interest payments would be responsible for the member states, and this is the overall EU 27 obligations. And then the model simulated the effect post-2033, where the principal of the debt actually begins to be paid. Now, it's important to note that the debt does increase, of course, debt obligations by governments, and therefore limits, in some cases, fiscal space, and that does have an impact, of course, on government expenditure. But it's important to note that based on our modeling exercise and output, the reduction in that element is so small compared to the overall economic GDP gains that this is not something that we're concerned about based on our modeling exercise. So that concludes, I hope not too technical, but probably still somewhat technical, intervention, and I hand it over to the further debate. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's debate time now, and we will be answering the question, is this the way to recharge Europe's economy? Is this the way to respond to the direct and indirect policies of global players and make Europe more competitive? And I would like to invite our speakers, distinguished guests. Thank you so much for coming. And then I will give the floor to any questions, comments that you might have, so please get ready as well. I would like to invite, and I'm so sorry if I mix up some surnames. Caroline van der Ringdonk, Head of Unit, the Platform European Commission. Caroline. Professor Dr. Reinhilde Vogelers, among others, Senior Fellow at Bruegel. Piotr Jabłoński, the Managing Director of the Polish Development Bank, BGK. And Paweł Wideł, Vice President of the Board of the Lewiatan Confederation and Chairman of the Automotive Employers Association Board in Poland. And Marcin Korolec, please join us, because I'm sure you, after some grilling, you will want to respond as well to the comments we might have from our panelists. And I will jump directly to Caroline, because I'm sure everybody wants the response of the European Commission to these ideas. Marcin said during the press conference as well that bold decisions are necessary. So my question is, should we expect, or are bold decisions coming, and how these ideas fit into what is debated within the European Commission in terms of the competitiveness compass that Bartłomiej said was supposed to be presented today. Finally, as I hear, will be presented on the 29th of January if there is no postponement. How do you respond to these ideas and the fund, the structure, the way of financing it from European debt?
Thank you so much for the invitation and for the contribution to the debate. I'm really happy to see that the European Competitiveness Fund announced by the Commission President sparks so much interest and ideas in the room. This is really a good time to have this kind of discussion and to have such valuable contribution with a lot of creative ideas which are all substantiated. Although I have to say the data on the domestic import reduction is quite aggressive. So that was my first point. It's really a good moment because 2025 is the year where the Commission will put forward its proposals for the next MFF. So it's really a good time. Now, entering a bit into the flesh, I will discuss the what, the how much, and the when. So starting with the what. Completely agree for the case for change. This is loud and clear from the Draghi report, from the Letta report. This is also what we get as feedback from our industry across sectors and of all the size, from the startup to the large companies. The case for change to unlock European potential is really there, and it's really a priority for the Commission, the entire Commission, which is at the eve of its new mandate, but I'm sure you've read the guidelines and the mission letters from the Commission, and I hope you feel the boldness and the support to our industry and our green targets and our competitiveness. Second point on the what, I wanted to flag a point from your report on having a friendly system for entrepreneurs. This is an important signaling effect. It's not only about the idea, it's also about operational execution that works, that we have a good pool where all the relevant stakeholders, entity can find their way. So full support. I wanted to highlight that points. We need to make difference on the ground. About the scope for competitiveness, what I also wanted to flag, we talk a lot about new technologies, innovation. In the case of clean tech, it's of course also about infrastructure, about having the right skills to deliver. It's also about helping our industry transition towards our ambitious climate targets. This is an area where Europe is a pioneer and will continue to be in the clean transition to lead the world. So that was about the what. So which are the sectors we want to support? Again, the indication from the Commission at that stage and the Competitiveness Fund is really to support strategic sectors, breakthrough innovation, and some of the sectors are mentioned: AI, space, clean tech, biotech. So one of the questions is, how do we make up that list in a manner that's supportive of competitiveness across the EU? Because choices will have to be made. That was a strong message from the Draghi report. We have to pick and select where we want to be champions, where is the future, and focus our efforts. So I'm giving a point on the what and the strategic sectors, definitely green transition being a top priority. Now on the how is probably where I have the most to say. Starting with taking a step back on the competitiveness. Competitiveness, it's about investment for sure, and this is the bulk of our discussion today. Competitiveness is a lot about improving business conditions faster conditions for permitting, because there is a lot of sometimes disconnect between a new project when we get the funding, when the company gets the permitting. So we need to really work as a system all together. So it's also a lot about reforms. It's also about trade policy, access to critical material that we need. So we really need a new ecosystem where all the priorities are tackled in one way together, including towards other trade blocks. So it's about investment, but it's not only about investment. If you want to have the most leverage, you need also an industrial and business environment which is conducive to growth and to fast growth. A strong assumption that you take on the structure of the fund is that it's a fund which would be structured with envelopes per member state, and you bring elements to that end. I would say that's one scenario, and this is a scenario substantiated in the paper. There are other scenarios for the structure of the funds. So here, what I can say today is really not to forget in the debate the European value added. Where is it that the EU level makes a difference and needs to take action and needs to fund? Where is it that the member state should play which role? Where is it that this region, this county should play a role, make a difference? And all those levels need to work together. So I really want to insist on the single market being, it's a wealthy bloc. It's a very big bloc. We have more customers than the US. We are a powerful bloc. In this time where there are lots of changes, let's also be confident in our things. I think there are as many startups founded in the EU or AI engineer trained than anywhere else. So let's build on our strength. It's important, I think, as a signaling effect to our companies and entrepreneurs. So again, that's one of the scenarios. There are other scenarios. I would like to also remind about the single market. I would like to remind that something maybe I missed a little bit in the paper is how does that coordination mechanism work to make sure that member states because we're talking about EU funding, so I work for DG Budget, so I feel like this is the EU policy, the competitiveness for the EU. What is the mechanism to ensure we go in a consistent direction together and that we don't maybe work with different standard, double standard, conflicting priorities. So how do we emulate at the same time level playing fields, supporting our industry in each and every territory, in each and every region? How do we reconcile it with also having a good policy steer at EU level for everybody? So that's the part maybe that I was missing in the paper. And again, there are different scenarios. I'm always using these conferences to be a bit pedagogic about the EU budget. As you know, how are EU funds spent today? So there is a part of the EU budget which is spent what we call directly, so it's a commission centrally picking priorities to the benefit of the single market, of the entire EU. So that's one idea. We want to champion in this. We want to have a capacity on this. And that's the smaller part of the budget. The large part of the budget is allocated in national envelope, depending to a very transparent equation, and is supporting a number of objectives. Agricultural policy, cohesion policy. So it's important to be aware of that balance today. And en passant, I also wish to mention that there are many policies, programs of the EU budget today which support competitiveness. There is the Innovation Funds, which support 40 billion for clean tech and clean industries in the EU. The RRF is a big one, but there is that one as well. And also in cohesion. In cohesion, there are lots of actions supporting competitiveness in all the territories. So here again, maybe what I missed a bit is how do we bring that all together? In that scenario for a European competitiveness fund, and I really stress where is the value added. The EU budget, if you look at the entire continent, it's not big. It's not a big budget. So you need a minimum to make sure all our actions are coordinated to be a powerful bloc. So this was about the how. Now talking about the how much. I'm really glad this question is coming up today. And what is the size of it? Thank you for the creativity on the own resource decision. For all of you to remember, the EU budget is mostly funded by national contributions from the member states. We have quasi no taxing power. You remember that the IRA mostly operates on tax credits. That's an instrument we do not have at EU level. And of course, we have the example of the RRF, which is funded by borrowing. And here I wish to recall the EU is, I think, the second largest issuer of green bonds globally. In just a few years. There was a high demand for that. So when we talk about transition, let's not forget about this aspect. So it's all the contribution to the green bonds for the issuing of borrowing under Next Gen EU. So of course the borrowing, I mean, that's a scenario that we hear a lot. As you know, the EU budget is a very powerful instrument, and the decision about how it's funded and what is funding is really one that involves all the stakeholders, all the institutions. So I'm really looking forward to having the discussions with the member states and with the parliament on the support to the EU budget. I cannot say much more than that. The decision is not in my hands. About the size. Again, I think before asking how much, I really want you to remember the first question, which is what do we want to fund with that money and with what instrument? I want also to bring another element to the debate on the size, which I missed a bit in the paper, which is private funding. Private funding. The Draghi reports give a really striking number, 800 billion of investment needs. Wow, blowing away. You know, where is that money going to come from? Well, not only from the public purse. So it's extremely important that we also work to develop our institutional investment, private investment, capital markets across the EU. It's a key reason why we are lagging behind the US. We are punching way below our weight. I think the largest VC firm in the EU is number 15 in the world. So capital markets are typically taking risk, and this is what you need for innovation and for certain type of growth. So I can only say I'm glad to read that it's a top priority for the new Commission, and there will be a publication on the Union for Savings and Investments under the responsibility of Commissioner Albuquerque. And this I really want to stress because, again, public funding, of course, a massive investment effort is needed at EU level, at national level, for sure. But we really need to work to have the maximum impact, because that's public funding is really a kicker to help de-risk the environment, and then that we can develop private funding to take over and to help in bigger tickets. Because supporting research development projects, it's pretty much in the remit of public funding. But when we grow into large manufacturing capacity and we want to be at scale, we want to be able to compete globally, then difficult for the public purse to do it alone. So I really want to bring that aspect of attracting private investments, institutional investments to the challenge. So that was about the how much. Then talking about the time, I can only support what the minister said about not following standards or models that were developed years ago. We need to be quick. We need to be as quick as companies are and take decision every day on which market do I open, which products do I bet on. So we need to really rise up to that challenge. And I also agree that we should prepare a game-changing model that works, so that takes a bit of time, but that we need to act quickly. It's important to make a difference, and it's also important as a signaling effect to show our industry and business that we support them. I want to flag that today we already have an instrument which is STEP, So that's an initiative which was which saw the light thanks to the support of the ITRE and the Budget Committee of the Parliament only last year. STEP is precisely about pooling funding from 11 different EU programs, existing ones, so it's not a new one, in one direction, which is to support strategic sectors: digital and deep tech, clean tech, biotech. So it's really, let's do what we can do with what we have today. I want to stress this because this works today. And there is a top-up attached to it of 1.5 billion for the European Defence Fund for STEP sectors. STEP is about innovation. It's also about the reduction of strategic dependencies. And I think I really echo the priorities you presented on competitiveness and also resilience, strategic dependency. So it's the two objectives. It's also an instrument which is very innovative because it pools efforts across the different sources of funding. So the programs managed centrally to the benefit of all by the Commission, and the cohesion and RRF programs which are managed with member states. It's based on incentives, so there are financial incentives for member states to carve out from their envelope funding for the STEP sectors in their member states. And I have to say, after less than 1 year of operation, I think we've achieved a lot already. We already have 10 member states. We have decided, I'm gonna take and dedicate and invest from my cohesion programs to support STEP breakthrough sectors in my member states, and that's and the number is gonna be, it's more than 7 billion which have been committed. We have 10 member states in the group. Poland is one who is already very interested, and I really commend the interest, and we hope to get more. So it's about funding, it's also about simplification. To rebound with what I said at the start with helping entrepreneurs, we have launched a STEP portal, hopefully with no Commission jargon, for project promoters everywhere in Europe to look, if I'm a clean tech, I don't need to find my way, where do I go, which fund do you apply to? You have one place and you can see, okay, there is a call for proposal for funding, I can apply, I can go there, and I know which ones are upcoming in my member state or at EU level to support my project. So STEP in that sense, and I think it was also portrayed that way by the Commissioner for the Budget, Seraphine, is a bit of a pilot for the future competitiveness funds in bringing simplification, in focusing on strategic sectors, in pooling all the funding sources together, and also we are trying to work with private investors to promote European projects and to tell them, look, those sectors, they belong to breakthrough technologies, you can support them. I wanted to say a word about timing because this is operational right now.
I think we need to move. You have a very broad comment. I think we need to move to the other speakers as well, because I know that the report outlines many elements and there's a lot to comment on, and I would like to ask you many questions in terms of what you've said, including, for example, would it be possible, do you think that it would be possible in any way for the Commission to change its way of funding entrepreneurs, and, for example, what Marcin said, paying for operational costs, not only for investment? This would be a big change in how the Commission operates and funds companies. But I would like to go to Professor and to bring the geopolitical context that was also mentioned by Edo, because I think that we all can feel that this will impact Europe's decisions as well, and we have to have in mind what will be happening in the US. So my question would be to you, apart from, of course, commenting on the fund itself, is how to work on Europe's competitiveness and implement new instruments. Caroline says that we have instruments already, some implemented, but we are here from the other side. We need new funding, we need new methods, we need bold ideas, we need to act now. So how do you do it, having in mind that some of the ideas that someone would want to implement in Europe might not be seen so positively in the US?
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. These are very targeted and to the point questions here. So I would indeed like to emphasize the importance of the urgency within the geopolitical context here, and also that we really need drastic reactions here. It's not just more of the same that we'll not do here, but the issue is way broader than just dealing with reactions to the IRA and to our Green Deal CO2 targets here. It's more broader in terms of what kind of industrial policy do we need to secure EU's future competitiveness. So that's way broader here, because it's not just only the green emissions, it's also emissions of security, defense, also because of the geopolitical uncertainty, security of supply of critical technologies here. So there are way more objectives than just the Green Deal here. And also I think we should really look beyond purely the budget and the public budget as a policy. It's really all a mix of policy instruments that we need in order for an industrial policy to be working for the future competitiveness here. And that is something I'm a bit missing in the calculations of the report here, because first of all, they only look at how much do we need in order to react to the IRA, but that's not the right question, I think. The question is really the future of European competitiveness, not only in green tech but also in other sectors here. And just a reaction to the IRA, well, the IRA is only public budgets. In the US, they don't have other, like for instance, climate ETS or prices for carbon. So it's a very inefficient way actually of getting to the targets, and why would we then actually only look at the reaction to the IRA here? So I would be very careful with having that as the objective function. Also, what it ignores is really the whole policy mix here. So it assumes actually that policies that are already in place are very efficient, that the technology diffusion will take place here, that we also have all the technologies already here, and it's just a matter of further developing and further deploying them here. But that there are still breakthrough new technologies really that we could need and that we could have to leverage on in order to build future competitiveness here, and that is something that requires really a dedicated innovation policy part of industrial policy here, that really goes beyond just allocating certain public budget to the different countries and according to the different sectors that are active in. So what I really like to emphasize is that, of course, the discussion on how much public budget do we need is important, and how we should find the money for that, but it should always be seen as part of the overall policy mix that we would need, and the policy mix really also needs to think about all the other complementary policy instruments that create the right framework conditions for the private sector to be actually having the incentives to innovate and to invest here. You mentioned private investment is important, is critical. We cannot really solve the issue with only public budget here. We need to be able to leverage the private investment, and that's why these other policy instruments are very important as well. So this is, of course, for green, has to do with how strong is our carbon price, or ETS here, how strong are our regulatory frameworks here, but also more generally, because it's not only green, it's also more general, so that for other technologies and other sectors as well, and particularly for the future. So that's why I think the single market is a very important instrument as part of a framework condition here, single market in general for products and services, but also the single market for capital. I think it's really crucial, risk capital, but also more in general. Also labor market, further integration in that, 28 regimes, so that the particularly new companies, because it's really the contestability and the competition that's really a very important driver for having private investments here. That's really very critical here. And although it is in the Draghi report, most of the discussion now is on the public budget and the size of that here, but how much we will actually need will really depend on also how effectively we can use that public funding, and it all depends on these other complementary policy instruments and these market reforms that need to take place here. So assuming in the model that the policies are already efficient, I think is a wrong starting point here. We really need to think of the overall policy mix that needs to be in place here in order to know how much budget we actually would need in order to be able to leverage the private investment as effectively as efficiently as possible here. So those kind of policy, complementary policy instruments are, in my opinion, perhaps even more important than how much public budget we would be needing here. And then there is also, like you mentioned, also the discussion of how much to be done at the EU level versus at the member state level here. But that, I think you already discussed about that here, and I think we really need to look at where the complementarity is and where you can actually leverage with the right kind of mix between EU and member states level, the right kind of ecosystems that are really can play on the EU scale here in order to be competitive on world markets here. So what I would like to...
Thank you so much. Pavel, it's time for the private sector's perspective. And what I would want, first of all, to comment, because we hear that, public money, yes, but we need private sector's money. But also we have these ideas of how to change the way and simplify the way the European Union could finance investment, not only investment, but also operational costs. But also my additional question would be, if you would want to answer, would be, having in mind also, again, I'm coming back to what we hear from the United States and this shift towards fossil fuels, and do you think that Europe should be ready to abandon some elements of the Green Deal?
Thank you for inviting to this very interesting debate, and thank you, Minister Karolus, for presenting the ideas of the fund. So let's start from the beginning. Automotive industry, not only in Europe but globally, is going through the unprecedented transformation period. I think this is comparable to the transition from horses to the internal combustion engine, which means that some of the entrepreneurs, like in the past related to the horses, they might not survive the revolution. And now we have a very important question, how to make sure that European automotive industry is not sharing the fate of the horse-based transportation from the past. And if you recall, during this transformation, we had a couple of choices. A very good choice was keeping horses like smarter, faster. Second was to use steam, which actually failed. The vehicle created by genial French engineer Cugnot made like 3 kilometers per hour. But if you look at another technology, which was battery electric, the very first vehicle made by human to cross the barrier of 100 kilometers per hour was electric. La Jamais Contente, I think it was Belgium, by the way, engineer who made this car. But then a couple of Germans made internal combustion engine, and it turned out that the revolution was won by gasoline. With all the consequences, Henry Ford introducing the production line, and then improvements of the internal combustion engine, then oil crisis in 70s, and then Japanese, Koreans, and now Chinese. So the revolution in the automotive industry and in mobility, because what is important, we're talking about industry, but I think it's critically important to remember that what we are producing for you is driven by you. I think it was a Ford advertisement slogan, but it works perfectly well. So the mobility revolution will impact how we are producing the means of mobility. And the question is whether Europe will be in position to play a role in this revolution. In the context of global competition, we are in Europe a bit behind. I recall a very nasty comment from a Singapore professor like 8-10 years ago that US innovates, China imitates, which is not true anymore, and what Europe was doing? Regulates. And I think that I think that Minister mentioned very rightfully and correctly, even with this huge fund of 300 billion, 400 billion, over 1 trillion billion of euros, if we don't change the way we act, we might be burning even trillions of trillions. It won't change anything. So I think that it's time to act now. I think that in some constant aspects we are a bit late, and looking at proposed solutions, I'm not talking about the amounts because it's irrelevant. The most relevant is how we spend any budget, any funds. I'm not talking about technicalities, whether it's a German part or French part or Spanish or Italian or Czech or Polish, because European industry is so integrated. I'm working for Stellantis, technically Dutch company, which is actually a global player made out of Fiat, Chrysler, Peugeot, Citroën, Opel, with 300,000 employees around the world. I'm also chairman of the Automotive Employers Associations in Poland. I'm looking at colleagues. I think that I saw one from Volkswagen. And basically all the big companies are multinational global players. And now those companies, they have a choice. Europe is not the most important market. I'll give you an example. Production in China, 30 million vehicles a year. Production in the States, whatever, 12, 13 million, which is 1/3 of China. And the largest European car manufacturers is Germany, which is around 4 million a year, which means China, States, Korea, India, and then Germany, the 5th global market. Now, whether we could change this global situation in the automotive industry, we might be trying, although my appeal is that we have to do it very fast. And now, ask me why. The answer is very simple. We are adding to this traditional component of the automotive industry where we were producing internal combustion engine, we are adding a completely new dimension, which is battery electric vehicle. Now, who invented internal combustion engine? Europeans. Who was mastering the internal combustion engine vehicle? Europeans. The value of the car with internal combustion engine was generally built, created in Europe with value added. Now, if you look at the battery BEV, battery electric vehicle, 1/3 of the value of the car is battery. 1/3 is software, and the hardware is remaining 1/3. Now, a question. Who is the owner of the first 1/3, which is battery, traction battery of the vehicle? Any ideas? China. 70+% of the global production of the traction batteries, China. Software. Who is the owner of software now in the modern world? Any ideas? It's Poland, Germany, France?
US?
US, right. So Europe would be left with 1/3 of the value of the vehicle. And now try to build a business model based on the assumption that we are out from 2/3 of the value chain. So any fund has to address the weaknesses of Europe, which is not only automotive industry. I think it's general. So it would require a massive, dedicated work on financing, research, development, then manufacturing to de-risk European battery production. Why everybody wants to invest in China in this area or in the US, less in Europe? Labor cost, Are we competitive in terms of labor cost? Any ideas, including Poland? The answer is, compared to China, maybe not. Energy cost. If you compare megawatt hour in Poland with Spain, we're in a lost position. Spain is very, very cheap. But if you look outside of Europe, China and the US both are cheaper than Europe. And other costs related to the our environmental regulations, all the quality, safety, and other regulations which are making Europe the best place to live, they are impacting the cost of production. So on one side, we would need to make sure that we are heavily supporting research, development, and production of, for example, traction batteries. And on the other side, which I think Minister Karol has presented very clearly, we would need to address the OPEX side somehow. So yes, we need support, but we need a smart support, because we can burn any money you have. On the other side, if you want to have automotive industry to be a backbone of the European economy, we have to smartly think together, regulators, business, but also all stakeholders, about making a model to survive. Access to critical raw materials.
We need a new economy, a new way of thinking, a new economy in Europe, a new way of the Commission proceeding. That's a very,
yes, but just
to conclude, please.
Just to finish. I know that later you are than less time you have. For you. So I think that this approach would be the new approach would be required to address the issue related to the automotive industry in Europe, taking into consideration that we have to address not just one single issue, but a big matrix of them. I have a proposal which is supporting, because your proposal is very interesting, however, it's like a bit late. 2027 for the automotive industry might be a bit late. So how about CO2 related fines? Should automotive industry in Europe pay 15 billion euros fines for not complying to the CO2 targets? 94 grams of CO2 per kilometers as of 2025. Shouldn't it be smarter to offer some flexibilities to smooth out the way to 94 grams like over 3 years' time? Alternatively, should European Commission would collect the fines, because I think European Commission would be the addressee of those fines, shouldn't be returned to the automotive industry the way it's just supporting automotive industry before your great plan would come into effect 2027, shouldn't be used for support of purchase of battery electric vehicles. There are countries like France where support is great. There are countries like Germany where there is no support. There is no pan-European policy on this. How about infrastructure? Is the same in the Netherlands and Poland? No. And yes, okay. So
Sorry.
I understand. Thank you very much.
We will have time to
I have another
after
17 pages.
I believe you do, but this is also my role to say that we will have time to talk about these issues also during the reception. But I want to come to Piotr. It's an advantage and disadvantage to be maybe the last one in the panel, because you can also comment on what has been said and using your perspective from the financial sector. But precisely, if you would want to answer the question, Marcin says that the next generation EU model is the best way to finance and go forward. The Commission likes this idea, and many says it likes the next generation EU method.
Just to be clear, I said it's one of the scenarios.
One of the scenarios. Would be great to hear all of the other scenarios. But what do you think of it? Poland is not that convinced, I think, that the next generation EU model is the best model, not only to finance competitiveness, but also to replicate it. So what would you say?
Okay, so yeah, being the later that's what you said, I have this is advantage, disadvantage. Let me start from, let's say, competitiveness report. What I would like to raise, and then try to answer the question. I have three comments, three points. First of all, the report by Mr. Korolev, by Cambridge Econometrics, underlines the needs of investments in green clean technologies, which is important. First of all, from the climate mitigation, let's say, needs that we have, and as well as important from the issue of what was raised, cost of energy. The whole, let's say, efforts that we are taking green transformation. The ultimate aim is to lower energy costs, which is one of the key factors of insufficient European competitiveness. Then so this is important, but even the more important thing is what was raised by Caroline, is the issue of boosting investments in innovations, in new technologies, in high-tech technologies, AI, cloud computing, and so on. Now the name of the game is not only to develop these technologies, but also how to adapt them into our European industries, services, to make our businesses, our industries more effective. And here comes the issue of innovations, funding, financing innovations, venture capital investments, and looking at the level where we are in Europe, we are 3 times lower compared to the States. According to World Bank estimations, venture capital investments are about 0.3% of total GDP in Europe versus 1% in US. By the way, in Poland it is even much more lower. This is about 0.05%, which is lagging far behind Europe even. So this is it shows how the investment innovation funding gap is in Poland. So here comes the role of the banks like ours, like national promotional banks, development banks. We can invest in venture capital through our direct investments, or intermediated investments, but this will be enough. And here comes the issue of attracting private sector, private capital, and this was also raised in Enrico Letta's report. He underlines the need to attract, to mobilize private savings, private deposits. 33 billion euros are lying in deposits in European banks. And if they're invested mostly in US equities, or in case of Poland, they are invested mostly in real estate, which is the favorite aim of investment of private investments in Poland. So the question is how to attract this private money, private capital. This could be achieved through different portfolio venture capital investments, special instruments like concessional funds, fund of funds. This is also the question how to attract pension funds to invest more in innovations in Europe. So at the end of the game, the issue is how to make European money invest in European innovations. So this is the question. So this is my point number one. Then the second question is about let's say general. It was also a little bit raised by you, how we are thinking, how we think here in Europe, how the US development model looks like. And in Europe, we say that Europe is more push model, meaning that we in Europe and European Union tends to proactively manage, drive development through policies, through regulatory frameworks, through central funding initiatives, central programs. This is how the Europe operates. As opposed to this, in contrast to this, U.S. is rather pull model, meaning that this is more market-driven, innovation-oriented, leveraging private sector, mobilizing innovations, and so this is more rather pulling the resources, talents to be directed to areas of potential high returns. So this is the issue, and especially U.S. has a enjoys very robust venture capital and entrepreneurship ecosystem that attracts investments from private sector. So definitely we need to learn from them, and the way of thinking, and even in what was described in the report, even the example of such U.S. report of different thinking is Inflation Reduction Act, which is not the central program, but this is based on tax reliefs, tax credits. So the ultimate impact is unknown upfront. So this is the other way of thinking. So what can you learn from this? Okay, this is the way we think in Europe. Okay, we have our own advantages, but I think that what we can take is what was also raised today is the simplification. Simply simplify the way we our policies, our regimes, our through less bureaucracy, changing our regulatory framework. I have particular ideas or examples, state aid rules, reporting requirements. There is a big discussion now in Europe, and it's good that it is now high on the agenda of the new European Commission, and this is a direct need to work on this fast, to make it faster. And coming back to the issue of the fund, this is not only the case how it's going to be formed. I'd like to underline it is also important how the funds is going to be distributed, meaning that here comes also the role of such institutions like ours, like local development banks. We have the knowledge of our local, regional, national markets. We know we have long track record in utilizing and distributing EU funds. We know the local particularities. We know which projects are, let's say, most attractive, worth financing. Even sometimes they are risky, they are smaller. So we have this knowledge. So we are here to assist, as opposed to let's say more pan-European global, let's say, approach and distributing through central institutions. We, as development banks, compare ourselves very often to EIB, and also coming back to Draghi's report, we have counted this very thoroughly. Draghi mentions EIB 140 times in his reports, while NPBIs are mentioned only 30 times. So this also shows that the local approach, local focus is required, and this is how we would like to, we are ready to assist. So 3 things to sum up. We need to hire European savings for European investments in high-tech innovations, less red tape, less bureaucracy, and we need to bring local expertise in distributing EU funds, and we are here as such institutions like ours to help in that.
Thank you so much. We have a few comments now from the audience, and maybe I would start with the perspective of the European Parliament and Adam Jarubas, who will start. And Adam is a member of the ITRE committee and also a member of the Conference of Committee Chairs. So welcome, and
Thank you for the invitation. First of all, I would like to say that I'm impressed by the idea and the execution of the report. It's not often that people from the outside, the institutions, come up with the ideas that may give an impulse for the development of the EU. And frankly speaking, today we are in need of such ideas, and as without the new means of financing of transformation of European economy, we will not be able to compete with likes China and United States. I'm aware that in the EU, even if in my political family, there are politicians who are of the opinion that we should stick only to the market solution and avoid centralized public aid. But in the situation in which all major actors are pouring money, public money to the market, we are not able to act in the other way. I think that the proposal that we heard, maybe with some correction, is crucial for the future of the EU, and in this regard I would like to share with you with the two short remarks. First is that we need the money not only for the competitiveness of our economy, in fact the political mindset, and the main goal of Polish presidency are at the moment directed towards the topic of security. And additionally to the proposed program for competitiveness, we need at least 50% more for the investment in security and defense. This, of course, is not something we should discuss in detail here and now, but we need to take it into consideration. And we need to take into account the fact that investment in security and defense, although is not by default the investment into clean technologies, but is helping the economy as well, as traditionally many of these technologies that were conceived for the defense sector ended up in everyday life. And the second remark is that the European Parliament traditionally was proposing increase EU budget and additional funding. So the above proposal is in line with this point of view. But we know that we cannot just increase the EU budget, and additional funds have to be collected, as in the case of RRF, from the financial market. And as the EU budget cannot run a deficit, the money financed by the debt needs to be managed outside of the budget, and this means that the Parliament does not have an oversight on this procedure. Having said that, I'm of the opinion that anyway Parliament would welcome such a proposal, but would ask for some scrutiny powers, perhaps not for this budget, but certainly if such a procedure would become the new normal.
Thank you very much. And now, Witold Literacki, first Vice President of the Management Board of Orlen.
I will try to not speak too long, so thank you. First point, I first time heard about this idea about special foundation, creation of a special foundation. It's a very good idea, because we should remember that we can't leave alone the businesses in the European community and say, okay, here are your obligations and you have to work, yes? Fulfill it. This is first. Yes. Second is we are staying on the position that if we will have a less number of penalties and more incentives, more allowances, the business will try to run, and I think that it could help very, very, very fast in the business. Yes, because. If I have a problem, like a businessman, because I can't fulfill Fit for 55, and I will have to pay the next penalties, what can I do? I will change the place of working to Asia, or I will just bankrupt. So this is the reason why we are thinking in this way. Less number of penalties and more incentives. And the last one, I have such a sentence, and it's a very I think it's very helpful in the business that we should base on the rule of the technological neutrality. Technological neutrality show us that we needn't to be according with some regulations which was imagined I don't know where, because I don't know why sometimes, and we need to spend a huge money on this new technology to get the same targets like we will do in our way, yes, much more cheaper. So this is next idea, and I have a question concerning the industry side in European Union qualified as a hard to abate sectors, such as producers of cement, steel or petrochemicals. Do we have any idea how to help these businesses? Because we can say, of course, this is wrong business, bad business, this is not according with the green politic, but on this business we earn the money which we can invest for the future, for the green energy, yes, and the carbonization. So we need to understand that for some, I don't know, few years, we will cooperate together, yes. We can't close it in one moment, because we have so many places in European community. If we close one business, we will have, I don't know, 100,000 people, and what to do with these people? We have no any other ideas to give them a job, work, etc. So the governments can't pay all the time some social for these people, because this money will finish very fast. So this is my question. How we see the future for such businesses like petrochemicals, like steel producers, etc.?
Thank you very much. One thing, we started 5 past, we'll finish hopefully 5 past, so bear with us. But since I worked in the European Parliament in the past, we're switching to 1-minute speeches, please. And so that anyone who would like to answer some of the questions from the panel will start to have a possibility, and then we will ask Marcin as well to conclude. But now, one last question, Renaud Battier, ist? From the Director General of Ceremony in Brussels.
Okay, yes. Thank you. I have to do it in 1 minute?
1-minute speeches. Okay. The members of the Parliament do it, you can do it.
Well, I'm not prepared. So ceramics, I'm the European Ceramic Industry Association. And in ceramics, you don't know what it is probably, or you just know some things, but we have a lot of construction materials. You need them for, if you want to tackle the housing crisis with affordable and sustainable products. You need it to make steel, to make aluminum metals. You need these refractory pieces that you have in your furnaces. 100% of steel is made with a ceramic refractory. You need it in your windmill, you have bearings. You need it in your batteries, you have ceramic resistors that are everywhere. You don't know us, but we are absolutely everywhere. We are in the value chains, and my main message really is, I heard a lot of positive things today, but when we are targeting sectors, we are saying it should be really targeted on sectors. In fact, we are talking about value chains. So this, whatever you are doing, it has to be adapted to taking into account the whole value chains, the large and the small companies. But the first thing I welcome today is, of course, recognizing that we need to change everything fundamentally, and that it has to be business friendly. And today it's not business friendly at all. There is nothing business friendly. As Mr. Draghi said in his report, you need to solve the energy crisis. If you don't solve the energy crisis or the cost, then forget it. There is absolutely no way we can succeed. We played our gas. We talked about the price of gas. It's 5 times higher than in the US today. And if we want to move to electricity, it's 3 times higher than gas, and hydrogen 5 times higher than gas. So there is no short-term solution, but the targets are coming very close. In terms of business friendliness, if you talk to a small company that is not in ETS 1, is it in ETS 2, this company doesn't even know today that it will have to pay a carbon cost in 2027 between 50 and 250 euros. No one here can tell them how much it will be. And the only ones who want to invest are the ones who don't know that this is going to apply. The ones who know, they are asking, what can I do? And there is no answer. So and for finance, of course, OPEX and CAPEX, very, very important, very welcome in the report, and for these reasons, because you're not profitable from the beginning, and all the funds have to be adapted to also taking into account multi-site companies, heterogeneous companies, SMEs. If we talk about Horizon Europe, if we talk about one recommendation from Mr. Draghi, making contracts for difference, carbon contracts for difference, available to all, you need a dedicated task force to make it reality. And I have plenty of examples like this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The energy issue will be discussed by the Polish presidency next week at the ECOFIN Council, as well as this is an issue that was said by the Deputy Minister for Finance, Paweł Karbownik, as a crucial element in terms of the thinking of the Polish presidency and in what it wants to bring and discuss also among ministers for finance, which is something maybe newer than was in the past. Małgorzata Maurer, now a short comment, and I remember about you. I do. Short intervention, please.
Thank you. 1 minute, I guess. Well, I work in Polpharma. That's a pharmaceutical producers, the largest in Poland. Just talking about the dependencies. I mean, we have our eminent guest, Mr. Jarubas, who understand the topic extremely well, being part of the Sand Committee. Just pointing your attention that the dependencies on medicines have proven to be killing the economy at the time of COVID. That is something that we cannot repeat. Therefore, the European Commission has taken on board health as a topic and healthcare as a topic, but also how to reduce this dependency. And we have a Critical Medicines Alliance, which is working towards finding the way of reshoring some of the critical API, which means the heart of the medicines, which should be produced in Europe to make sure that these medicines can be applied. So within the next 100 days, which is our focus also today, we really would welcome the Polish presidency driving forward this initiative. There is APIs that can be produced in Poland. APIs is something that if we produce, we can not only serve Poland, we can serve Europe. It is a strong industry. It's a technologically advanced industry. We really hope the Polish presidency can drive it forward, and the European Commission is also determined. So there is 2 good elements there that could help us win this case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dariusz, and finally, sorry to keep you waiting. Right here. Oh, yes. The gentleman. Yes.
Thank you. Bartosz Owiecki, I work for Coke. We're a large manufacturing enterprise. We have also float glass producing plants, so we produce the glass that's in windows in buildings like this one to make them energy efficient and actually reach the goals that you want to reach. But until recently we had 11 plants in Europe. We're now down to 7, and we already announced that to some of the heads of state that we will not be making any more investments in Europe, and this is because the energy prices are so high here, and because of the ETS. And here's my question: we're talking about creating another fund. But, the ETS has been around since 2005. I mean, a lot of money has been collected for making these transformations. So where is all that money? Could you explain where that money went to? Thank you.
Okay, so now maybe let's work like this. Marcin, if you could maybe you want to answer some of the questions that that were posed, and also comment on our panelists' interventions. And if there's anyone else who would like to later on comment for 1 minute, and then we will be finalizing. Don't worry, because I think that most of our speakers will be also present during the reception and hopefully open to talking to you later after the formal end of our debate. Marcin. You need a mic. Where is the mic?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very rich conversation. That will be probably Polish minute and not Brussels minute. From
You have the power to turn off.
First, I would defend the idea of a fund with national envelopes. In a sense, for two reasons. One is political economy reform, and at the end of the day, from the European Council or Ministerial Council, there is a gentleman or lady who is coming to the capital and needs to have a success in saying yes, 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 I want it, and that is mechanics of capitals in Brussels. So we need that. But more importantly, national envelopes are a securing instrument for a cohesion, in a sense that we will not have a two-speed Europe. I mean, those big giants will eat all money existing in a market or in a public sector. So that is also a warrant element of a cohesion, and cohesion is, as I understand, the second important word in the Polish presidency program, just after security. That is the first sentence. Second, I am very happy that we are saying that the debt is one of scenarios, because budget would be invitation, as I said, for choices between agriculture, cohesion, and other priorities, and that will not secure enough money for industry. That is a second element. The third sentence, I am very deeply convinced that we need to change policy foundations from creating a market to supporting a supply, because otherwise we will be flooded by BYDs and Teslas imported from Shanghai. Pavel Vidal was saying that debt solution is too late because it is 2007. Budget solution is even later because it is 2028. There was a question about how hard to abate industries, and I think that is a perfect invitation for a creation of a system of negative emissions, and to create a system where forestry, CCUS, agriculture will be able to trade those negative emissions to those who are hard to abate. Climate neutrality idea is not absolute zero, it is net zero. So by the definition, there are some elements of negative emissions. And maybe last sentence about ETS2. ETS2 is not necessary from climate neutrality perspective. I simply don't understand why on earth French Prime Minister or President, that was President, agreed on that system, having 2 years before yellow vests on streets of Paris. And that is a perfect invitation for yellow vests, not only on streets of Paris, but also Warsaw, Bucharest, Rome, etc. Thank you.
Caroline.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the attention and for the question. 2 points from my side. First, on the borrowing. This is something we do today with our ref. When I said it's a scenario, I mean some member states have came out and clearly said we support it. Some member states came out and clearly say we are against it. Because that's what I mean by scenario. There is no Commission position on that. I want to be crystal clear. Second point, the one I would like to react to is your point on what do we do with the industry on cement, steel, who are on the path to decarbonization. You may have heard EVP Zielonej, who is in charge of establishing the European Competitiveness Fund and is in charge of industry, very clearly saying we need a path, it's not only new tech, we need a solution for our industry, which are today present, established in our territories. And he mentioned chemicals, steel, I'm not sure the list, but those industry and the need to help them. In the coming weeks, there will be a Clean Industrial Act proposed by the Commission involving all aspects, competitiveness, state aid, green dimension, and I hope it will give some pointers to your question. On the question on ETS, what happened to the ETS? So some of it came back to member states, some of it came to fund the innovation fund. That's a 40 billion euro fund outside the budget, funded by the ETS until 2030. There is a call open right now for all companies to possibly get funding from the Innovation Fund. Of course, there are many criteria. It's an EU-wide call. So that's an example of I think it's one of the largest clean tech funds globally, and that one is funded completely by ETS. So I don't have the exact list of who are the beneficiaries and the sectors. I'm sure that can be found, but I just take the chance to mention there is a call open right now.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the organizers gave us an impossible, task to have this big debate on this big report and bold ideas in this short period of time. So I hope that maybe this is just the beginning of the discussions during the Polish presidency, maybe just one of the discussions that will concern Marcin's and Edo's ideas. Please remember that if you don't have the report, you can take it from the foyer. If you don't have the report, you can also download it online, I think, on the social media platform of the organizers and for sure the Green Economy Institute. Again, if you have any other questions, please stay with us at the reception, and a final word from the organizers.
Yes, thank you. I also promise to stick to the 1-minute rule for that. So on behalf of Business and Science Poland and the co-organizers of the event, I would like to thank all the speakers and all the panelists and the moderators. So please give a round of applause for all of them. It was a very insightful discussion, and like you said, it's still the beginning, so we plan to continue also at Business and Science Poland to have more events on this very timely and very crucial topic, I think, for the whole European Union and for its future. So we started with this today, but the topic will be also followed on, actually in 2 weeks, we're going to have another big event on the 27th of January called Better Europe, where we're also going to try to discuss and try to tackle the challenges that are listed in the reports by Draghi and Letta. So definitely something that we're also informing about, and we look forward to having you here as well. I can see that the reception has already started, so I think the best idea will be to just move there and continue discussions, and feel free also to discuss those topics with our speakers. So once again, thank you very much for coming, and let's discuss the other things there. Thank you.